I always knew that we would get Ronnie out. And part of that was because Ronnie always knew that we would get Ronnie out. And that belief, I think, allowed us, like our whole team, to think much more creatively and expansively and outside of the box than we would have ordinarily. And the film is like a very good example of that. When we lost that parole hearing, that last parole hearing, the one that you saw it, what you didn't see in the video is that hearing had been broken up into two pieces. So we did the first piece without the fraternal order of police. It was just me and Tom Green, the man who prosecuted Ronnie all the way back in the 70s. And although that first part of the hearing went well, we already knew we were going to lose. We knew we were going to lose because they had broken it up into two pieces. It was a very bad sign. And that's when Ronnie said, let's get a documentary. Like, you know what? Screw this process. Let's get a documentary. Let's think.
Welcome back to another episode of Unshackled Building Bridges. I'm Yale, this is Ronnie, and today we're sitting down with someone whose work has touched not just my life, but the life of my brother Ronnie and countless other lives across Illinois. Our guest today is Jennifer Soble, and founder and executive and director of the Illinois Prison Project. Jennifer, for people listening that might not know you, you got a story. Why don't you start off by telling your story in your own words?
Thanks. Thank you both so much for having me on your show. It's a real honor and a privilege. So my story has really been shaped by the wonderful people I've been able to work with over the years. I always wanted to be a public defender. I grew up in a household full of lawyers. I was the oldest kid in a family full of very aggressive male lawyers who picked on me in an effort to toughen me up. And so it was always pretty clear, even from a pretty young age, that that's where I was going to go and what I was going to do. And when I was in middle school and high school, I started understanding and learning about not only the economic inequities in this country, but racism, poverty, and the way that the criminal legal system has been used by the people who run this country to oppress people of color, people without economic means. And I, from a very young age, knew that I wanted to be a public defender. So I sort of blazed through college. That was a mistake, don't do that. And I went to law school really intending to go into public defense work. I was really fortunate to be able to spend the first part of my career at the Public Defender Service in Washington, D.C., which I think is pretty widely considered the best place to learn to be a public defender that there is. And while I was there, I had a very sort of unique and unusual experience where I got to represent a couple of incarcerated people who had already served decades in prison and for one reason or another had an opportunity to come back into court to get resentenced. Public defenders usually only represent people during the front end, right? When they're at trial, when they're being initially accused of a crime. They very rarely have the opportunity to represent folks who have been in prison for a very long time. And judges very rarely have the opportunity to reconsider the fate and the incarceration of somebody who's already served a very long sentence. That experience was really special. It was really unique. Of course, the people who I represented in those contexts were incredible, wonderful human beings. And I was really lucky to be able to help get them out of prison. But I didn't think very much of it. I was there for about 5 years, and then I moved to Chicago for family reasons, and I spent a year at the Bluhm Legal Clinic at Northwestern Law School. And there I had the genuinely life-changing privilege of representing a man named Anthony Gay. Anthony, who you guys might know or know of, went into prison in 1998 after he literally snatched a hat off of another kid's head. He was 19 years old at the time. He got a non-carceral sentence, but he was put on probation. He violated his probation because he tried to drive without a driver's license, and that was enough to send him to prison for 2 years.
Wow.
Which is heartbreaking in and of itself. But the thing about Anthony is that he had some mental illness, and when he got to prison, his mental illness really manifested. And he started acting out in ways that were totally consistent with mental illness, and in many ways were a cry for help. But the Department of Corrections, as anyone who knows anything about the Department of Corrections knows, is really, really poorly equipped to help folks with mental illness. And so rather than recognizing, hey, this guy is struggling, let's get him help, the prison officials threw him into solitary confinement. Anthony was in a cell for 24 hours a day, alone. He was both deprived of all human contact and subjected to sort of the horrifying environment of other folks who were subject to solitary confinement. So people screaming, yelling, crying 24 hours a day. So both no contact whatsoever, but also like the tortured sounds of other folks who were suffering as well. Being in solitary confinement made Anthony's condition significantly worse. And he started trying to figure out ways to exercise some sort of power. And most of those ways involved damage to his own body. Anthony began engaging in self-harm. And so he would cut his arms and legs, he would put things into his body, anything, screws, staples, pieces of toothbrushes, pieces of like stone from the ground around him. He swallowed everything and anything. And these were really egregious calls for help. Anthony also would occasionally engage in conduct that was sort of an attempt to reclaim some power that was external. He would sometimes spit on correctional officers. He would sometimes throw water or urine on them. These were acts that were gross. It was gross, but it was never dangerous. Nonetheless, and despite the fact that all of Anthony's sort of violent acts were always directed against himself, this is a man who at one point cut off a testicle. He was really, really injurious to himself and to himself only. Despite that fact, the prosecutors in Livingston County, which is the county where Pontiac Correctional Center is, which is where Anthony spent over 22 years in solitary confinement, began prosecuting him. So remember, Anthony went into prison on what should have been a 2-year sentence. By the time I met him, he had a 101-year sentence. Wow. And this was all for, it's called aggravated felony. The felony is aggravated because it was against correctional officers. And it was always for conduct that, if it was in the free world, would have been a misdemeanor. So we're talking about spitting. We're talking about throwing water.
Right.
They prosecuted him again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And by the end, Anthony was supposed to get out of prison in the year like 2101. It was ridiculous. I met Anthony while I was at Northwestern. He wrote a letter to the law school asking if we would help him. He, at this point, had written letters to everyone. Anthony was an incredibly powerful self-advocate. And at that point, many people had tried to help him. Many people had tried to get him out of prison. There were lots of appeals to the Supreme Court, both at the state and federal level, none of which had worked. What hadn't happened was no trial lawyer had ever looked at Anthony's convictions. He had been, he represented himself at his trials. He didn't trust attorneys by and large. And so nobody had ever just like gone back to the nitty gritty and asked, were these sentences structured correctly? And it turns out in Anthony's case, they weren't. And so we were able to go back and restructure all of his sentences, and Anthony got out of prison in 2018, just 4 years after I met him. Anthony's case was really transformative for me, because it made me wonder how many other people who were incarcerated had been egregiously harmed by a system that was invisible to the rest of us. And in fact, him and his story are one of the really huge origin stories for the Illinois Prison Project, which I created just a couple of years later in 2019. with the sole purpose of helping folks who are serving sentences that are unjust, excessive, unnecessary, wrong, right? Anthony's sentence was just, his sentences were wrong. But who, because of a lot of sort of intentional choices by funders, by the government, by Congress, have been entirely deprived access to counsel.
So I'm glad that you went to Washington to get warmed up with the system.
Yeah.
So that when you encountered me, you were, like they say, vetted, or you were well boxed up, ready to fight. Because I had a big battle. Not as much as the man you're talking about, Anthony, or what was he called, Anthony? Anthony, not hit. But I've witnessed many times that scenario of guys being in segregation that long, and they even, when they would yell out and scream so much, why do you keep doing that? We would ask them, and they say, I hear a voice, I just hear things, and I yell out to just block that out. They have strategies in their mind of what they're doing, even though to the average person, it's like, man, something's wrong with this person, as far as the cutting or eating light bulbs and all the other stuff like that. But I'm glad you, the way we met each other is I seen your Illinois Prison Project, and it was it triggered my mind. I was reading in the newspaper, I said, Illinois Prison Project, I got a project. So I kept the paperwork, but I sent her a proposal. Not a proposal, yeah, it's like a proposal. And asked me, when you're done, or not done, when you're not busy, if I got a project for you. And that was the Illinois Prison Review Board. But when I read your track record, that Gilbert did some research, I didn't know you had all that, public defender, being a professor and doing all that law college. So, to congratulate you on your credentials, they're, highly esteemed credentials, to be able to battle that, and then to pick up a fight of the criminal justice system is big enough, but then to fight, that's the legal field before you get to Department of Corrections. But then to wrestle with that entity, that's a whole nother big fight, and you've been winning that fight. So it's a lot of congratulations, to go on with that. So as far as Gilbert has, that's on that, just a congratulations. I think I had a question of why did you become a lawyer, and why did you this and that, but you answered all that you had a family full of the lawyers, and you were, stepping into the attorneyship through them. And then as far as the criminal justice system, why you picked that, or why you already spoke on all that. So that takes my question away from there. So I'll go into the question about, because in the video, we did the video called In Their Hands, and in there, you show flashing, you and Ronaldo Hudson flash your hope tattoos. And it's just ironic that what made you that day, and I don't know, did you go together and get it the same day, the same tattoo artist, all that, so you did all that. What made you both come to the conclusion, we're workers of hope, and to go, well, let's go prove it, and we're going to stick it on there, So when did that come about? What caused that to, all right, let's do this, the conversation, you remember it?
I do. It's funny, so Anthony, the person I was just talking about.
Him again, huh?
Him again. I mean, he's a really big part of my story. He actually created IPP's sort of tagline, which is Hope Inspires Hope. I have always been a really big believer in hope. I think part of why the sort of back end of the criminal legal system in Illinois, but also everywhere in the country, is so devastating is that we have taken hope out of the equation, right? When we move to a system where you get the sentence you get, and there's no way for you to ever get out, no matter how well you've done, how much you've changed, how sorry you are, how terrible your sentence was in the first place. If you are there until you die, that kills hope, right? But if we inject humanity back into the process, right? If we say, either by showing up, by litigating, by changing policies, if we say, hey, we believe in you, right? We believe in the power of you. We believe in the power to change. We believe in our power to lift each other up. That brings hope back into the equation, and I don't think there's anything more transformative or more powerful than hope. So hope has been a big theme of IPP's, of mine, of Ronaldo's for a very long time. I have quite a few tattoos.
So you just sat down one day and would say, Ronaldo, I like hope, you like hope. Let's go to the tattoo shop. You go to a little baby parlor, or a personal person there?
No, we went to a place in
a little tattoo shop.
Yeah, a little tattoo shop on like 35th, I think, sort of in the Bridgeport.
And y'all two are the only one to have it.
We're the only ones that have it. I wrote this, I found this a font that I liked. Ronaldo wanted to do something a little different, and I said, you can totally do whatever you want, but this is what I'm doing.
Did it hurt?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it hurt as much as it. Do you have any tattoos?
Yeah.
I got some tattoos taken off.
Oh,
that
yeah,
really hurts.
yeah, that
I
really
got
hurts.
tattoos all
Yeah,
over.
I see that you've got some, yeah.
Yeah, dog gang tattoos getting.
Yeah.
Now that I'm talking, I want to thank you first of all, for stepping to the plate. I've had public defenders before, and it's a mixed thing. Sometimes you feel they're for you, sometimes you feel they're not for you. And they don't really step up to the plate, but you stepped up to the plate big time. But I have a question for you, Jennifer. Can you walk us through the first time that you heard about Ronnie's case and what motivates you to take it on?
Yeah. Whew. Yeah, that's a big one. So people had been approaching me about taking Ronnie's case since about 2020. And I just want to remind folks that until 2019, I had done basically no work in Illinois. I worked on Anthony Gay's case while I was at Bluhm, but I was only there for a year. Then I went off and I was a federal defender in Indiana. I just had no relationship with anyone in Illinois. I wasn't in the Illinois scene until I started IPP in the summer of 2019. By that following summer, so the summer of 2020, COVID had hit. People were understandably really desperate because of COVID. And maybe in March, April, not quite the summer, I started getting calls from folks very specifically about Ronnie, asking me to take Ronnie's case. At that point, we'd gotten a handful of people out of prison, and we're starting to make a little bit of a name for ourselves. And probably because there was no other organization just doing what we were doing. There were lawyers. There was a person here and a person there, but there wasn't a legal firm that was just trying to get people out who weren't innocent. Be very clear about that. There are a lot of innocence folks, but we were not focused on innocence. And at that, I got a call because at that point in the spring of 2020, we were starting to have really good luck getting the state's attorney, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, to not oppose people being released. We were getting them to start to agree that folks should be released, and they were agreeing both in front of the Prisoner Review Board, and they were also agreeing in front of the governor's office. And there were a group of folks who were talking pretty regularly about sort of strategies about how we were going to get folks out of prison, especially during this COVID epidemic. And I had started to raise with folks that we were having this luck, that we were getting the Cook County State's Attorney's Office to stand down. And I think it was based on that that I started getting calls about Ronnie. And the first year that I agreed to be involved, I didn't take his case. I wasn't his lawyer. I was sort of a second chair. I was sort of behind the scenes. And I was really, really moved by his story. Anyone who's talked to Ronnie immediately falls in love with Ronnie. You can't know Ronnie without representing Ronnie. That's why Ronnie has so many lawyers. I
said that before.
Yeah, so I think I talked to him once and I was in. And the first thing we were able to do was actually we did two things right away, which is we got the Cook County State's Attorney's Office to not oppose his parole, which created sort of a whole backlash, ruckus down the road. But we also got the Prisoner Review Board to give him another hearing in light of COVID. So he had just had a hearing, not that far before COVID hit, and then he got another one sort of before the 1 year mark. In light of that extraordinary epidemic. It did not result in his release. It was that hearing was, I believe, I don't remember if that one was pretty close or not. I think I was not at that one, and it was the one in 2021 that I was pretty involved in, but not the lawyer for. But the one in 2021 was also very, very close.
So from what I learned, not to cut you off on your question, from what I learned from when you joined coming in, the different strategies you had, that my mindset was from so many years of my strategy was pointing out their flaws and standing on using a hammer every time, just pounding it on them. And then how you came and just started shifting my thought process of hearing you saying, to soft walk it in a sense. I kept saying, hey, we need to box them this way. And to the way you did it, like bringing the state attorney in there. We had tried that once before and it was ineffective of who prosecuted me. So that was a major impact to bring that. So your outside work to bring it to the table exposed basically the board of their standpoint that they turned into that hard guy attitude, hard guy character. So as I sat back and watched that, now that's become my strategy to other people because as we talk on this program and different places, the majority of people that were in the institutions with me, they have a hard tone of they did this, they did that, they did this and that. So, and it's hard for me now to be the person and say, we don't want to bash those people, and then they look at me crazy. Like, who's this guy now? Because we're used to, them people did this and they did that, and that's where you live at in your mind. So now to say, you have, and I accused my attorney at that time, Gene Snyder, of the exact same thing, saying that I know you have got other people, have helped other people be released. So you see what they're doing to me, but instead of you fighting the fight it has to be, I'm being sold out in a sense because you won't fight them what needs to be done in there. No. And then, but in my mind, I was seeing it that way. And so when you came along, and that's why I told Gene, I wanted Jennifer to speak for me, and it changed my whole makeup to sit there. And I did not see until I seen the video, the In Their Hands video of you speaking where you're getting chastised by the chairman of the board. He's basically telling you, shut up. You're an attorney. You have a right to speak there. And basically, shut up. We're not going to let you talk. We're not going to let this happen. So it's like he's structuring what you're going to do or not do. And instead of fighting back, you're like, yes, I understand, but sir, and yes, I understand, but sir, in a soft manner, but kept it going. So now I adopted some of that in there, and then it's a blessing for you. It's a blessing for me and other people that the Illinois Prison Project created when I was in the institution, the navigation program. Number one, I never even seen a computer. Number two, I never estimated me, the person they had me labeled as, that they allowed me to go into a room with this kind of equipment, a security room in a security place, and I see this prison on the line and this prison on the line, and then your team talking to us how to file this and how to file that. So I was just being bombarded with technology and a program that was trying to teach people to do this. So that was a plus. And then upon my release, and we could talk about that all day, but upon my release, to be privileged to sign up for the ambassadorship program, now to go in there and sit down and have your team that were trained already. So you put a lot of work from 2019 when you started until now. You put a lot of work in and a lot of thought process. And when I seen you had to take these like tests about sexual harassment, all this, I was reading all this stuff to get in there. And I'm like, I wonder if all this happened, man. They got this thing so, you can't do this, you can't do that. It was so protective, and it's the design of it. So then, to tell your story, and then, like I'm doing now, talking a lot, and then they tell you, no, you need to take that down, and you got Caitlin in there, and Jessica, that your story will be better this way or that way. So you mastered that education department to do that, and it's just a blessing for me to do that, to be part of that, and to watch you in the prison review board. So I didn't get a chance to see it until I seen the film, to see it, the live part of it. So, and when we go do the filming, or go see a film, she was like, you want to see that? And I'm like, every time I see her, wow, that happened like that again. I'm just like rehearsing it in my head.
But Jennifer, back to the questions I was asking. I want to ask you another question, because this question has been pondering my head for a long time, and ever since, it's been almost 2 years. But that day in court, nobody knew what the judge decision was going to be. Nobody knew what was going to happen. I mean, you didn't know beforehand, hey, they're going to let Ronnie go. We're going to let Ronnie go. We're going to let you know.
Oh, I hate
Let me tell you that. What was going through you? What was your adrenaline? What was the emotions? And then when the judge said, and you knew Ronnie's coming home, what went through you?
I hate to shatter the image, but I knew that he was coming home.
Oh.
I walked in that courtroom already knowing, because in Illinois, we have these very special conferences with the judge. So the week before,
October 10th.
October 10th, the week before, we actually met with the judge, me and Ronnie's other lawyers, Chick and Michael, and the prosecutors. We had a meeting with the judge. So we knew he was going to get released. We already knew.
You know what, to talk again, but I was in the system, so she had told me, hey, we're going in to meet with the judge on October 10th, and I'm just like laughing. She was, what you laughing? I said, I was arrested October 10th. So they were going in.
So now that you say that, what was your emotions when the judge told you?
Yeah, well, that was the much more nervous making meeting for me, right? Was this meeting with the judge. And let me be clear, when we actually went to court, I knew, but it's one thing to know Ronnie's case. I've thought before that I knew what was going to happen in Ronnie's case, and I have been like super, super, super wrong. And so there's knowing and there's knowing. I was a mess between the 10th and the 18th, just like the whole time. That week was awful. I mean, it was wonderful, but it was very scary. I mean, I think I cried a lot. There was a lot of like nervous energy. Having Ronnie actually be released was and being present for that was one of the absolutely hugest privileges of my entire life. I mean, it was pretty amazing. And there was a lot of relief, not just for Ronnie and his family, but I think what's made Ronnie's case so hard over the years is not just that this incredibly wonderful human being has been, locked away, deprived of his life, but also there's been this, at least I think, for me, this really dramatic sense of injustice. And knowing that finally people were paying attention to him in the way that he deserved, and were finally setting him back on the path that he should have always been on, and that this fight could end, I think was a really big thing for me. And I want to say right now that my participation in the fight was minuscule, right? Just right at the very end. And there have been people who've been fighting for Ronnie's freedom, not the least of which is Ronnie, right? For decades and decades and decades. There have been folks who have been by Ronnie's side for decades and decades and decades. And so I felt an immense amount of relief for Ronnie, but also for all the folks who've been walking alongside him this whole time.
So, now that I know you guys a little bit, I know Ronnie quite a bit, I know you a little bit now that I know Ronnie. If I wouldn't know Ronnie, I probably wouldn't have known you. And I always want to thank you for helping my brother. You know what I'm saying? And that I can't thank you enough. But you're like a mother hen sometimes with him. What's up with that?
You should bring Ronaldo on. What's up with that? Some of that is just like a little bit who I am. I'm a little protective. Some of that is, Ronnie has to comply with a whole bunch of rules while he's on mandatory supervised release. Some of those rules feel really obvious. Some of those rules do not feel really obvious. Like, why on earth can you be on one side of the line in Illinois and that's cool, but be on the other side of the line in Indiana and that is not cool? Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense when you live in a place like Chicago. So part of it is, as his lawyer, I don't know, it's maybe like an extension of my job to make sure that he's not only like complying with MSR, whatever, but thriving.
How do you feel about that, Ronnie?
Well, I watched her operate, and it's like when you trigger the trigger, they say you're not going to do something. She has a different kind of itch that she's going to get it done. Upon my release, I was supposed to go to Indiana the next day, and they blocked my interstate compact. So they sent me to a halfway house, and I'm sitting in this halfway house, and this guy's telling me, hey, you need to sign here. So I'm not signing nothing, I'm going home. He says, listen, guy, parole agents don't come once a month. There's not going to be no parole agents here. You're not going to get an interstate compact for at least a month. And I'm sitting here and I said, no, they're working. I'm not going to stay here and I'm not going to sign that. I'm leaving. And I called Sister Janet. I asked that guy, can I have visitors? He said, yes. I called Sister Janet. I said, hey, would you bring some eclairs over here? And let's break bread and let's pray. So she did. And we're sitting there eating the donuts. And then about 12, she said, don't worry, I got you. She took my paper. If you watch our video, when she hugged me, you could hear her saying, don't worry, give me your paperwork right now, I'm on it. And she went to work. And by 12 o'clock that day, sitting in his halfway house, and the door knocks, and the guy opens the door. It's the parole agent. So the guy who's hosting the house, he's like. So then when he left, he said, your interstate compact should be here. The paper's in a couple minutes. I'm gonna go get that, but you're going to Indiana. I want you to go to Indiana, stand in front of the sign that says "Welcome Indiana," and take the picture. I want to know you're in Indiana. So when he left out of the door, the guy who was running the halfway house, he's like, "Man, dude, who are you?" And I said, "It's not me." I said, "It's Jennifer Soble." I said, "This lady said I'm gonna get you," and within 5 hours or 7 hours, she got me interstate compact, and she got me in Indiana, where they had planned me to stay here and block me here, and it didn't happen. So when I tell a lot of people about my story, I can't raise my flag because I had a bad name, bad nickname, bad case situation. But the more you made her, Michael, especially Michael Deutsch, and then I met Charles Hoffman even more, and these professionals just came to bat, and the more they denied me, it just made them come out more. And even the climax of the whole thing was to get that video done. Now you just see it in action, because before we were just talking it. They're violating this, they're violating that. But when you sit there and watch the documentary, the common person, what we call lay person, the lay person that don't know laws and all that, it's obvious to them to see. And whoever sees it, they're like, I can't believe they do that stuff. I never knew that stuff.
So that documentary Ronnie's talking about is called In Their Hands, and you can find it at pbs.org. Check it out. It's very interesting. I mean, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I want to know if you can go ahead and kick the floor with her for a while before we close this. And
I want to say that my favorite part about this story is that you had the sister bring you eclairs, not just donuts, like specific eclairs. Nice.
When I was a young man, before I went to prison, I went to high school. There was a bakery on my way there, and this lady used to all the time show me that. I don't know what it was. So I went in one day, and I ate it, and that was from then on my favorite donut. So before we go, I got one question. I don't know how to answer it, and because I go to a prison ministry where a lot of the people in there, either their husbands are in jail, their brothers in jail, or either they're going to jail, or either they're out and they're on home monitor. So it revolves around ministry. And the question is, because a lot of people file clemencies and all that, and how come they're not doing this? And because I am in the ambassadorship program with you and now working in the IPP, people know it, and they come like that. I'm going to be the person to bring this glory into their life, and I can direct them. But the question is, so many clemencies after such a 100, 150.
Yep.
People being granted the release, and then all of a sudden, the brakes are put on. So what is if there is, and I don't know if you can even let it out or expose it, the strategy to get this governor to, do some work?
No, it's so real. Governor Pritzker granted over 100 clemencies in that first year of COVID, and I think we all thought that he was going to be very good on criminal legal reform. And if you look around the country, there are governors in states all over the country, Republican governors and Democratic governors, who have been great on clemency. And so it feels like there's no reason why Governor Pritzker isn't granting clemencies. And the reality is, unfortunately, clemencies are political decisions. They're not like, they're not even like parole. They're not like what happens in a courtroom where it's really a decision of a judicial process or an administrative process. Clemency is 100% a political decision. And we have a governor who every couple of years is running for something. So right after COVID, Governor Pritzker was running for re-election. So from like 2022 all the way up until 2024-ish, he was running for re-election. Now we're in 2023. Now we're in 2024. Nope, now we're in 2025. What year is it? And we all know that Governor Pritzker is gearing up for a presidential bid. And so we've been caught in this pretty vicious cycle of Governor Pritzker's political ambitions. And I think he's a great governor, and I think he would be a great president. Clemency just needs to be a part of that portfolio. There was an op-ed in the New York Times last week written by a good friend of mine, Professor Steve Zeidman at CUNY, City University of New York, about this very thing, about the fact that clemency at this point is a bipartisan issue. President Trump grants them all the time. President Biden granted thousands of them before he left office. And so there's a lot of evidence that people on both ends of the political spectrum want executives to be using clemency, and governors aren't using that power. So somehow we need, as a sort of voting population, to help Governor Pritzker understand that clemency is a strength, not a weakness, and that he should be exercising mercy proudly every chance that he gets.
Now that you use the word mercy, I was thinking of a way, because it's a political thing when the political people, when there's an election year or something, they'll always say, oh, this guy's soft on crime. So the word and the phrase soft on crime, how do we eliminate those phrases that we're supposed to give mercy? It's a biblical thing, it's a legal thing, restore people useful citizenship. So at that standpoint, it should be a want to help the people to restore.
Yep.
That term, we have to get another term to it that'll nullify it. Like what you're doing is arm twisting with that phrase. You're trying to twist somebody's arm to not do something, to not give something. You know, it's not good.
Yeah, well, and I think that given the reality of our criminal legal system, we could just call it what it is, which is racist.
And racist on top of that. So that's one of the hopes that, like you say about having hopes, there's a few phrases that I've been talking to some political people. We've been to Springfield. That was another blessing, and I'll go into that we went to, basically, you had a couple House bills in, and one of them got passed, the Joe Coleman Act. There's a few women that are in this prison ministry that I'm part of, and their husbands are in jail, very sick, very, very sick, but not Joe Coleman sick.
Yeah.
They're, and I don't know how to do it, and every time I go to the ministry, I see these women just looking at me the whole time I'm at night. We're having fun, but you can see the sadness. Their husband's been in jail 15, 20 years, and they're not going to make the out date. They're that sick. But to extend Joe Coleman even farther than what it is, and it's amazing. Gilbert had the stats, or you have the stats, that when we were in Springfield telling the senators how much $380 million you're saving the state.
Yeah.
So when you're speaking that kind of language, something has to change, and it basically goes back to education. That's one of the reasons we're doing this podcast, of bringing the lawyers in. Next, I want to bring even state senators or state reps in here, and it's not to put them on the spot, but it's to put them on the spot, just to put the language out there. And the one language that irritates me a lot is when they talk about the word aisle. I'm on this side, and I'm on that aisle. And Jennifer and I it was a privilege to me to see a senator that is against me, like in my film, Never Let This Guy Go, and to be in our presence and say, how can I help you? Okay, I'm going to join you. And another senator right there was Senator Peters saying to her, yeah, join them and then help me with this other bill. And I had a chance to experience how this actually plays out. And I think we need to spend more time in that place.
Yep.
or take them out to more dinners or something to break bread, to show humanity and stop the legalistic, I'm this, so I can't do that because you're that. It's like sectioning off. But I learned that, so, it was a great thing to do.
So before we close off or everything, Jennifer, I want to ask you, I know that Anthony's case impacted you pretty much the way you talk about it, and from what I heard from you personally right now and everything. But how does Ronnie's case impacted you legally and personally? And then after that, you can tell us what would you tell everyone that's still incarcerated in there, and if Ronnie was still incarcerated, what would you tell him?
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah, hold on. So what's so interesting about Ronnie, and I felt this way about Ronaldo too. I have another client right now who I feel this way about. Is I knew we'd get him out. I had no idea how, and especially after we lost that last parole hearing. And I will say I did Ronnie's last parole hearing, and Anthony unfortunately had another sentencing within like 2 weeks of each other, and we lost both, and it was the hardest month of my life, just absolute depression for quite a while. But despite that, I always knew that we would get Ronnie out. And part of that was because Ronnie always knew that we would get Ronnie out. And that belief, I think, allowed us, like our whole team, to think much more creatively and expansively and outside of the box than we would have ordinarily. And the film is like a very good example of that. When we lost that parole hearing, that last parole hearing, the one that you saw, what you didn't see in the video is that hearing had been broken up into two pieces. So we did the first piece without the fraternal order of police. It was just me and Tom Green, the man who prosecuted Ronnie all the way back in the 70s. And although that first part of the hearing went well, we already knew we were going to lose. We knew we were going to lose because they had broken it up into two pieces. It was a very bad sign. And that's when Ronnie said, let's get a documentary. Like, you know what? Screw this process. Let's get a documentary. Let's start thinking about this differently.
So one thing I would say, not to cut you off, is it was in a joking manner that because I'm hearing your stories of all this time, of all the tears, and I seen my sisters and my family crying so much. We need to invest in a Kleenex company.
Totally.
Because we buy a lot of things. And the other part is all that work, I gotta give you a hug, you know what I mean? Because you saved my life, brought me back into society. Michael Doyce, you strategized when I had got before you get an attorney visit, they have to call the prison and say they're gonna make an appointment. So when I got the piece of paper in my cell, it said Jennifer Soble, Charles Hoffman, and Michael Doyce are coming to visit. I was just sitting there like, to myself, I said, man, the warriors are coming, the fighters are coming. My name was bad to these people, and so here comes these people who develop these reputations, and it's that hope of, and I was in the system, so when somebody would get a letter from the Illinois Prison Project that you created, it was like, and then they're seeing people go home through you. There was a guy, Ronnie Moore, and Ronnie Moore kept telling people from us, I'm going home, and people, man, shut up. They kept messing because he would get mad. No, but I'm going home. He said, man, I got IPPs, man, I'm going home, and they didn't. And when they came and told him that day, Pat, you're going home, and they, hey, Ryan won't let me talk to you. I ain't talking to nobody. Y'all don't want to talk to me. Now you want to talk to me? And it was just like, and S-Man, I just watched this go on, and then the other guy, I forgot his name, but he had a habitual criminal, and he's on the program, I can't think of his name. But same thing with him, that people, you're not going home, you're not going home. So to the people that had IPP, the hope that once they latched on and they said they're helping me, it was that you seen, because these guys, they're aggravated, walking around 20 years of loss, 30 years of loss, and that wears you down. I'm just going another hearing, I'm just going that's why my sister says in document, Ronnie will just go back to the Bible and it won't bother him. That's what you do, you just be like, man, another time, just keep going. So that's what IPP, so when I seen them, Ronaldo pop the hope thing, and then I go to the ministry I told you about, and it's a Koinonia House Prison Ministry, and here they're flying these shirts with all the prisons on it name, and I'm like, here comes this hope again. I'm a Christian, I'm reading the Bible with hope on there, and I'm like, and they call that in the Christian, it's confirmation. I said, this is, and I'm not trying to convert you. I'm not trying to convert you. So
Ronnie's always trying to convert me.
I'm trying to convert her. It's just, and I explained that the day that they resentenced me and the sentence happened, it was it, and I'm going home. She came back to the bullpen, and I was explaining to her, Jennifer, this is abnormal. You have to realize this is so abnormal. You just seen it.
You're still an angel. You're an angel, even though you don't want to admit it.
Yeah, that's what, so it's so abnormal that it becomes supernatural, and you're a vessel being used to make this happen. And for us to be on the outside, that is always reaching for that hope to get home, to get to our family, to get back, and then finally you come into the play, and there's the lock and the glue, and then when it happens like that, how can you not say it's not super? You know what I mean? Not to put you in the spot again, but you know what I mean? So
I burned cookies this morning. We'll disagree.
Oh, that's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. So it was a privilege for us to do this, and there's so much more. Your story can't be told in all this, because each one of them 170 people you helped,
174
people you helped to come home, never ever supposed to go home, and on top of that, the losses of those people's stories that are not, we have 200 losses, or people still sitting there like that, they're still being fought for, and then for her to leave, like right now, she has to go to fundraising meeting to do this. She's steady.
So she still hasn't answered my question, though. What would you tell every prisoner that's in there still locked up, and if
Yeah.
Ronnie was still locked up in there, what would you tell him?
Don't give up hope. Don't give up hope, because not only can really surprising and transformative things happen in a case like what happened with Ronnie, but we are fighting every single day with a group of really committed advocates to change the system. And we're changing it in little ways, but those little ways will become big ways. If you think about the Joe Coleman Act, which is Illinois' medical release program, we didn't have that 3 years ago. And we didn't have that 3 years ago because Joe Coleman, who was a dear client of mine, he hadn't passed away. His death had not inspired the creation of a process. That process had not yet been passed into law. And now every week, if not every other week, we are representing people who are terminally ill or disabled in these hearings that are resulting in people coming home. And so, things are continuing to change for the better, and you gotta keep up the fight. And to do that, you need hope.
So Ronnie, I want to let you take it off from here, and then when you're done, you can close it off with a scripture.
I just want to say congratulations to you, and congratulations and thankful to you for not only helping me release, but then take me in to your entity. That's where, to me, I fit in there. That's been my life. 47 years of showing brothers in there. We have to learn the law. We have to learn this. We have to advocate for ourselves. And I've been in education for the longest. I've been in training in the longest, not only legal, but spiritual, physical, all the way around. And you just become a trainer and walk in the yard with, Ronaldo Hudson. He got life, I got 600 years. Hey, we're not going to stay here. We had that attitude. We had that spirit that, no, we got people working for us. It's a matter of time. And then, like he created the building blocks, we're steady creating things. And then the combination finally glued on when you started your thing. Charles Hoffman got involved. So it's just a blessing of what's going on, of what you did. So that's all I could say to this whole audience. Support IPP any way you can, and people's lives depend on it. There's so many people in need, and it's that hope. And in closing and in prayer, that there's in Proverbs it says, trust in God with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And I believe that you have an energy. I don't know where you're saying it's coming from. My belief, I know where it's coming from. And it's a supercharged battery that not everybody has to take a month or two off to rejuvenate. But from going for 10 months straight, 24 hours a day, all day phone calls, and to administrate all them agencies that you had, you deserve the month or the two to sit back. And then even though you're sitting back, you're still not sitting back. So, that's my scripture. Trust in God with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, because the situations you're walking into half the time, we have to shake our head like, how do we get this one? Because each one's different. How do we get this one? And you're a great success. I appreciate everything you do for me, for the team you have, the people in the prison. And I believe that on the lost side, the ones that have lost, haven't won yet. I don't know your personal business, but I think you're not done with that either.
All right, so I want to thank Jennifer for everything she does and everything she's doing. And I want to thank her for taking the time off. She's a very busy person. She took time off to be with us on this show today, and I want to thank her very much for that. And thank you for especially, I want to thank you from my heart for my friend Ronnie. And this is Unshackled Building Bridges. We'll see you next week.
Amen.
Ronnie's seen it all from the inside walls. Gil got a vision that still stands tall. We don't beg for seats, we build our own. Bridge by bridge, we're bringing them home. Chains fall, bridges rise. We walk the dark with open eyes. No second chances.